U.S. military deaths. As of March 17th, the Department of Defense has confirmed 3,210 military fatalities and over 32,500 injured. Wake up, America!
Terrorism. Bombing, invading, occupying, and destroying other people's countries does not stop terrorists. It creates them from victims seeking revenge. Wake up!
This is appropriate to me because I too have PTSD. 1 in 8 returning soldiers from Iraq suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Many will have to live out their lives with the thought that they may have killed an innocent person. Wake up, America.
The Bush administration lied about the reasons it went to war. Now it is lying about why the troops cannot be brought home and the bases must remain. Wake up, America!
As of 10 days ago, 3,190 U.S. troops in Iraq have died and 23,785 have been wounded. How many more casualties does Congress want before it decides to bring them home? Wake up, America.
School and college bombings. On February 25th, 2007, a suicide attacker struck outside a college campus, killing at least 41 people. Most of the victims of the bombing were students at the college. At least 46 of the people were injured in the blast. Wake up, America.
In addition to violating the customary international laws of war as set forth by the 1907 Hague Convention, the Nuremberg Charter, and the Geneva Conventions, the Bush administration has also repeatedly violated the U.S. Army Field Manual in its conduct of the Iraq War. Wake up, America.
All right, we've got more to continue, but let's go march, shall we?
Sunday?
Oh,
How was it?
It was wonderful.
Really?
It was good.
About to march or about?
What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now!
Her name is Mary, and she did speak earlier at BU, and she has a little something to tell you.
Hi. This is a picture of my grandson. He was in Iraq for 24 hours and lost both of his legs. I'll never forget the day my daughter called me and said, "Mom, it's Stephen. He had his legs blown off. He's dying. He's on life support." I'll never forget the pain. I'll never forget the pain and the heartbreak that my family's been through for the last year. For 6 months, my grandson laid there, and they kept removing a little more of his leg, and a little more of the other leg, and then a little more, until they got one leg up above the knee, the other one just below. His emotional and mental position right now is really unstable, and most of our boys that are over there have been there and are. He's in Texas. He's still trying to learn how to walk again. I remember him being a little boy, and he was short, and he kept saying, "Grandma, I'm never going to grow." And he did. He grew to 6 foot 2 inches. He was the fastest kid. He was the fastest young man in his unit. He got citations and all that in boot camp. And now he can't run at all. He can't even walk. Bring our babies home. They don't belong there. Bring them home. Wake up, America. Wake up, America.
Wake up, corporations. Blame the corporations. I imagine people are going to start getting cold and going home, but we still have a whole stack of litany to go through. If we can start forming a line over here, they're about 3 or 4 sentences each. Also, marching down to some government building is fine. It builds our community here, but we've got to do more than that. We've got to think about how we can expand what we embrace to the people who don't want to hear it. You know, you look around, you see how many people here are firemen. How many people here are policemen? We have a few teachers. Thankfully, we have the mayor of Binghamton here. But we've got to expand this base. And we do it through discourse, debate, and dialogue, and not by yelling at people. So let's keep that in mind, because something tells me we're going to be here next year. War profiteering. The only Americans who are benefiting from the Iraq war and occupation are the arms dealers. Government auditors who canceled Bechtel's $50 million contract are now examining the company's $2.85 billion contracts in Iraq.
This was a great Molly Ivins walk. Let's say thank you for Molly Ivins. Syracuse did the same thing. There were 200 of us. 200 of us. Next one, the next card here, wiretapping. If our police wiretapped without a court order, they would be fired or arrested. When George W. Bush ordered it, Congress excused him. It was and it remains an impeachable offense.
Impeach Bush!
Impeach him! Impeach him! Impeach him!
We need volunteers over here.
The Patriot Act is not patriotic. It violates the freedoms we are guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, and it is not what our founding fathers had in mind when they wrote the Constitution.
Wake up, America!
Preventive war. Going to war to prevent war is obscene and ridiculous. It is also a violation of the UN Charter, which is the U.S., for one, has signed and agreed to respect. Wake up, America.
Humanitarian occupation. Why would the people of a country that we boycotted for 10 years, bombed and invaded twice, and occupied for 4 years, view our motives as humanitarian when they have the oil they know we want? Wake up, America.
Torture. Torture is no matter what else it is called and no matter where it is conducted. At Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, or the many detention camps, our country has shipped victims to who have never been charged with a crime. Torture is a crime.
Wake up,
Wake up, America!
Wake up, Congress!
Nuclear proliferation. The surest way to encourage nuclear proliferation is to threaten their use against countries that do not have them, or to use overpowering military strength against those who are relatively defenseless. Wake up, America!
We did not fear ourselves from England so that we could occupy other countries. Close the permanent bases we are building in Iraq, as well as the 700 other U.S. bases in 130 countries. Wake up, America!
Who authorized the United States to be the world's only superpower? By what right do we spend as much money on our military as do all the other countries combined? Wake up, America.
Siege tactics. Immediately after the first siege of Fallujah in 2004, reporters at a press conference asked U.S. General Mark Kimmett about the reports of Iraqi civilians being killed in Fallujah. You talk about a clean war in Fallujah, but the Iraqis have an image through television from what is happening in Fallujah, from killing children. Kimmett responded, with regards to the solution on the images of Americans and coalition soldiers killing innocent civilians, my solution is quite simple. Change the channel. Wake up, America.
Nuclear abolition. Since we have 10,000 nuclear weapons and are making more, and Israel has 200 to 300, why can't Iran have a few to defend herself? The only solution is to get rid of them all. Wake up, America.
The Patriot Act. USA Patriot Act and related measures allow law enforcement officials to peer into Americans' most private reading, research, and communications. The Act's hastily passed provisions not only violate the free expression and privacy rights of those using public libraries and bookstores,
Fire Gonzalez!
They also sweep aside constitutional checks and balances by authorizing intelligence agencies to gather information in situations that may be completely unconnected to a potential criminal proceeding.
Fire Gonzalez!
Wake up, America!
War resistor Aaron Watada, first commissioned officer to refuse to deploy to Iraq in June 2006. His first court-martial ended in a mistrial. A second set of charges has been filed. If convicted on all counts, he faces up to 6 years in prison for resisting this illegal, immoral war.
Money. 5.6 billion has been budgeted for just the surge. Add to that the 407 billion already spent on the Iraq war, and the 1 trillion needed to rebuild the country. And one has to ask if there wasn't a better use for all that money, like healthcare, education, housing, and stop global warming.
Military benefits. The military isn't a generous financial aid institution, and it isn't concerned with helping you pay for school. 2/3 of all recruits never get any college funding from the military, and only 15% graduated with a 4-year degree. Books for education, not for occupation.
Continuing torture. Although U.S. President George Bush has signed legislation banning torture, he asserts the right to interpret the legislation, quote, in a manner consistent with the constitutional authority of the president, unquote, as justification for the continued use of torture. Wake up, America.
U.S. and British forces have violated the Geneva Convention by cutting supplies of food and water to Iraqi civilians so as to encourage them to flee before major military attacks. The Geneva Conventions prohibit the distribution of food and water as a weapon of war. Wake up, America!
Iraqi civilian casualties. Estimates vary from 60,000 to 600,000 as to the number of Iraqis who have died as a direct or indirect result of the U.S. invasion 4 years ago. Their surviving friends and relatives are fertile ground for terrorist recruitment. So much for the lie that the war made us safer here at home. Wake up, America!
It was interesting that I got this one because I worked on a bill in Albany last year to get our National Guard and U.S. New York State Reserves tested for depleted uranium. And if anybody wants to work on that issue, please see me at any time today. Depleted uranium. Many Iraqis, Afghans, and occupying troops are still being exposed to depleted uranium used during the invasions. The longer the troops remain, the greater the chance their brains or kidneys will be permanently poisoned. Wake up, America!
Media blackout. The report of the Iraq Study Group found that the United States has filtered out reports of violence in order to disguise its policy failings in Iraq. The ISG found that U.S. officials reported 93 attacks or significant acts of violence on one day of July 2006. Yet the study group, after a careful review of the reports for that single day, brought to light more than 1,100 acts of violence. Wake up, America!
War profiteering. Inflated overhead costs and a maze of subcontracts have left little money for the everyday workers to carry out projects. In one contract for police operations, Iraqi guards received only 10% of the money allotted for their salaries. Indian cooks for Halliburton's subsidiary Kellogg Brown and Root reported making just $3 a day. Wake up, America.
War crimes. Iraqi leaders have called for a review of U.S. implemented law that prevents prosecution of coalition forces in Iraqi courts. Following reports of several alleged atrocities by U.S. troops against Iraqi civilians, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki said that immunity from prosecution encourages members of coalition forces to commit such crimes in cold blood. Wake up, America.
Attacking media. On April 8, 2003, U.S. aircraft bombed the Baghdad Bureau of TV station Al Jazeera, killing a journalist and wounding another despite the U.S. being informed of the officer's precise coordinates prior to the incident. On the same day, a U.S. tank fired a hit run at the Palestine Hotel, where approximately 100 international reporters in Marat were based, killing 2 journalists and wounding 3 other correspondents. Wake up, America!
At a congressional testimony on March 27, 2003, Paul Wolfowitz said, quote, "There's a lot of money to pay for this. It doesn't have to be U.S. taxpayer money. We are dealing with a country that can really finance its own reconstruction and relatively soon," unquote. He's now president of the World Bank. Wake up, America.
Very deep in the No Child Left Behind Act is a now actually well-known fact that you are required by law, if you're a school district, to provide not only access to students for the purposes of recruiting, but access to students' personal information for recruiting. However, there's a movement growing in this country against that. The New York Civil Liberties Union and the ACLU are a part of that, and they actually have some great resources on that website. But we need to pull that together here and make sure that no child is left recruited for this illegal war. Wake up, America.
The U.S. military is the single largest and worst polluter in the world, from toxins at bases to nuclear-tipped missiles to the destruction of ecosystems from South Vietnam to the Persian Gulf. In today's military, the tanks and weapons are coated with depleted uranium.
A poll that showed that 72% of soldiers wanted to leave Iraq by the end of 2006. Wake up, America!
As of today, almost $48 million of taxpayer monies of Binghamton residents has gone to the war in Iraq. Just consider what we could do with that money. The first Iraq war only lasted a few days. That cost, in just medical benefits for soldiers, $6 to $8 billion a year. Consider what this war is going to cost in the lives, as this woman explained her relative. This is just a horrible war. We can't fight wars like this anymore. Wake up, America.
In the November 2004 attacks on Fallujah, the U.S. military used white phosphorus, an incendiary weapon commonly known as Willy-Peter. Though white phosphorus munitions are banned under the 1980 Geneva Convention on Biological and Chemical Weapons, the U.S. has not signed the agreement and instead classifies white phosphorus as a psychological weapon. There is nothing psychological about a weapon that melts skin to the bone while damaging the nervous system and blocking the circulation of blood. Wake up, America!
This has to do with presidential signing statements. Just some facts here. George W. Bush issued 23 signing statements in 2001, 34 statements in 2002. These raised 168 constitutional objections. 27 statements in 2003, raising 142 constitutional challenges, and 23 statements in 2004, raising 175 constitutional criticisms on these signing statements. In total, during his first term, Bush raised a remarkable 505 constitutional challenges to various provisions of legislation that became law. Yet Bush has not vetoed a single bill. Rather than veto laws passed by Congress, Bush is using his signing statements to effectively nullify them as they relate to the executive branch. When do we start the impeaching?
International initiatives have protested against U.S. media for downplaying and misinterpreting protests as anti-Americanism, and have accused them of foul language. There was a personal, insulting tone to some of the pro-war commentary in the U.S. and Britain. Examples include calling Jacques Chirac a balding Joan of Arc and drag, and the New York Post referring to France, Germany, and Russia as the axis of weaseels. Childish.
The Military Commission Act of 2006 contains provisions that removes access to the courts for any alien detained by the United States government who is determined to be an enemy combatant, who is awaiting determination regarding enemy combatant status. If you are accused of being an enemy combatant, it is reason enough to detain you without rights to legal counsel. Wake Up America could be you.
Premeditated plans to invade Iraq. Leaked White House documents revealed that UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and US President George Bush planned to invade Iraq regardless of whether or not they won UN approval. Though Blair has asserted that the final decision to invade was made only 24 hours before the war began, the leaked documents from a high-level meeting between Bush and Blair indicate that the decision was made before the Security Council discussed but never adopted a second resolution authorizing war against Iraq. Wake up, America.
Supporting our troops. This is no better way to support our troops in Iraq than to take them out of harm's way. Support the troops, bring them home. Wake up.
I teach 5th and 6th graders, 10 to 12-year-olds. The majority of my boys are fascinated with war and war making. Several have expressed interest in becoming snipers when they grow up. We owe it to our children to teach them there are other ways to solve conflicts.
Wake up!
This one has to do with torture, because it disregards the Geneva Conventions. According to a former U.S. Army interrogator, mid- and low-level officials have shouldered all responsibility for prison abuse in Iraq, despite signals from high-level officials justifying the use of torture. Interrogators routinely use dogs, hypothermia, and other enhancements while interrogating prisoners, despite clear violations of international law. In fact, there's one interrogator who, after he had been discharged and came home, says he has nightmares every night because of the things that he did while he was an interrogator. Colonel Pappas, the top intelligence officer at Abu Ghraib, admitted authorizing such techniques without regard for the Geneva Convention. Stop the torture!
This one's on veteran issues.
Rumsfeld on trial.
The Boston Globe reported on an Iraq war veteran suffering from PTSD who tried to get help at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in St. Cloud, Minnesota. With his father and stepmother at his side, he confessed to an intake counselor that he was suicidal. He wanted to be admitted but was informed that he was 26th on a waiting list for one of the 12 beds. On January 16th this year, he wrapped a household extension cord around his neck, tied it to a beam in the basement, and hanged himself. Wake up, America.